to the top of the tower, Lucy. Great to see you again.
You too. Thanks for having me.
Put you into context. You're the best-selling author of so many wonderful books. They're saying 5.5+ million copies sold worldwide of your books. And the ones that the Hunting Party, the Guest List, the Paris Apartment, and now the Midnight Feast, which we're about to discuss. That's a lot of books. Are you? I mean, how do you feel about that number?
I mean, that just sounds nuts to me. I can't kind of conceive of that number, especially because you just spend all your time at home writing on your own.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, who are these people?
Yeah,
because
wonderful.
You've described yourself as being as a reader who turned into a writer, which is extraordinary because there's so many readers. Like I'm a bookworm, as you know, and we've met a few times.
I'm waiting for your novel.
It's never going to happen. But you've just finished my thought, which is I don't have one in me. I don't really want to. So I'm not a frustrated writer in that sense. But were you a frustrated writer?
Not knowingly. I think I just, I was working in publishing as a very kind of junior editorial assistant. And I think it was kind of being in that environment, surrounded by stories, people talking about stories. It made it feel really sort of accessible. And so I just started sort of tinkering away. And then a couple of years later, had a book.
Yeah, that was the hunting.
That was.
Oh, so you had books before that. I always get this wrong.
No,
because
don't worry.
I'm such a crime fiction lover that I misplace the provenance or the.
It was a long time ago.
Yeah, it was a long time ago.
Yeah, baby author.
When you walked in here, I said, "Gosh, you look so rock and roll today." Because the last time I met you, I was beginning to wonder, do you morph into the style of books? So the Paris Apartment, you're very Paris, very demure.
Well,
and now this one's like folk horror. It's like, yeah, I'm Lucy. I'm wearing the denim jumpsuit. I've got the fringe.
I feel like I'm going a bit Jim Morrison.
Yeah,
the big hair and the...
It's like you transformed. It's a great look.
Thank you very much.
It's totally different. Why don't you tell us about the Midnight Feast? Because I've read it, so I can chime in with you. But for our listeners who haven't, go for it.
Sure. So the Midnight Feast is set at the opening of a luxurious new countryside resort built on old secrets beside an ancient wood. And it's all set during this heat wave, the summer solstice. They're having this big party, but tensions and temperatures are rising and some unexpected guests have come to stay, and the local community are up in arms about it. They're incensed by these sort of new wealthy Londoners in their midst. And so it's kind of all set for this big inferno.
So within that inferno, you've got class, you've got a kind of inter-regional rivalry.
Yeah.
You have familial bonds that tie and untie, and you've got a lot of finger pointing and suspicion. You've got a classic, they call it a locked room, but obviously it's a locked spa resort.
Yes, it's kind of a closed circle. So I guess you're kind of ring fencing those characters in this sort of rural location, and then within even smaller circle within the hotel itself.
I love something that Agatha Christie didn't do, and a lot of writers didn't do until pretty much recently, which was titling the chapter with the name of a person, so that you know immediately where you are and whose story we're hearing. And there's a lot of that jumping around, which sounds pejorative. It's not. Actually, it moves around is probably a fair way of putting it. That feels to me hard to write, because you're just time shifting, shape shifting all the time.
I love writing like that because I love writing from kind of first person point of view, being right in that character's head, and trying to make their voices as distinctive as possible. So it feels literally like they are kind of confessing directly to you. It feels really sort of intimate to me, that point of view, I guess.
Yeah, of course. Talking about place, and I was saying to you that I'm trying to visit a lot of the UK, and I got down to Cornwall and Penzance a few months ago, and at the weekend I was in York, and you get to York, and then you see York, Whitby, and you see Whitby Monastery, Abbey I should say, and then it's Bram Stoker who developed a bit of Dracula from that. Place is so important for writers. So you're in Dorset for this book. Tell me about what sort of research you did, or is it in your childhood, or why there?
Well, Dorset, I mean, I've travelled to Dorset a lot throughout my life, but obviously went down there specifically for research. And just the more I kind of pulled a thread in terms of this sort of folk horror, pagan stuff, the more there was. I already knew, you like throw a stone and you hit a Neolithic burial mound or a stone circle or something. But there is so much there in terms of the kind of legends. So that was great fun. But I'm also a country girl at heart. I'm happiest with sort of bare feet and kind of dirt under my fingernails. I live in the country now after 10 years in London. So it felt like the book I was kind of ready to write.
You were drawn back to the rural side of your brain.
Yeah.
I'm curious about that. I'll stay in Dorset for a minute because we mentioned in our chat before you came on, as Harry Styles was playing in the background, we were talking about Thomas Hardy, of course, but you brought him up because you felt that was his sort of bailiwick in terms of geography and writing and mystery.
Yeah, absolutely.
I didn't know that about him.
Because I had this, one of the sort of first places I started in terms of my kind of reading for research was this wonderful kind of folk horror anthology. I'd say it's not full horror, the book. Absolutely. It's sort of adjacent. It's got touches
horror
of that.
Adjacent.
Horror adjacent, I've heard.
We're nerding out now.
Is the term.
Yeah.
But he was one of the originals. He had this wonderfully spooky short story that actually there's a bit of a kind of homage to in the book. So that kind of, and that real sense of place in Hardy as well. You can just picture, you are there in the countryside.
He's come up a couple of times in the books podcast that I do from guests who've picked Thomas Hardy, the Mayor of Casterbridge, and this idea of fate following you.
Absolutely.
And I think that comes up in your book quite a bit, this idea of crimes of youth become sins that you are culpable of and charged with.
Absolutely.
With a few decades behind you.
Absolutely, and it was sort of playing with this idea. So one of my main characters is this sort of wellness goddess, and she sort of reinvented herself, and it's all about kind of living in the moment. And so I suppose I wanted to sort of rather evilly sort of explore that idea. That's all very well, but what if you did something really bad in the past? Can you just forget that and move on? I
know. I was thinking Gwyneth Paltrow would not like this book. She would be looking at it going, hang on a second, is Lucy Foley looking at my Instagram or something? Anyway, what great timing to launch your book as well. I mean, it's borderline seasonal.
Absolutely. I think for the first time I'm sort of launching a book about that season in this season. Going to have a midsummer celebration, I think, something weird and solstice-y.
And with Somebody Will Die. And that took us far, didn't it? But I mean, you write it. Anne-Marie Whelan says, I've read all of Lucy's books and they're such great reads. Midnight Feast scared the life out of me with all those birds. I recall a stage play of Du Maurier's short story, The Birds, and it freaked me out. So Midnight Feast brought all this back to me. Why did you add this element to the book? It's the question. Fair question. Why the birds? Yeah.
Great question. Well, I love Hitchcock's films. So there was obviously that big sort of homage to that, I suppose, which I sort of mention in the book because I don't want people to be like, she's ripping off Hitchcock, without kind of knowing it. Yeah. So as that, I wanted to create my kind of own folklore, having read all this wonderful Dorset folklore. So without getting too spoilery, it really ties into that. But also simply where I sit and write at home in the middle of the countryside, we have these sort of corvids in the trees nearby, and they have this, really kind of pervasive croaking sound.
They have a present. I mean, is that crows and ravens? Is that what you're?
Crows and ravens. I would love to say I know exactly which ones they are.
But they're the big ones that you kind of say, God, they're so menacing, and then somebody else will say, but they've got feelings too.
They do. Apparently, they're really intelligent.
Really
which I don't know
bright.
if makes them. I don't know if that makes them less creepy.
No, I think it makes it worse. They can take apart an engine of a car and put it back together again. They're very, very smart. Yeah. So you live in a barn. And that makes it sound like
it does have windows.
Amazing! That's great. So
it doesn't actually have curtains, really. It really doesn't.
And one of your children was born.
He was,
physically in a barn.
Literally last summer, almost exactly this week, pretty much last year. This time last year. Tried to finish the book before him, didn't quite happen.
Yeah, that's plate spinning par excellence. Well, at least when his manners are going to pot and you say, were you born in a barn? He can say, yes.
Exactly.
Yes, I was. I can answer in the affirmative. You're going to New York. You're going to do a big tour of New York. Is this your first book tour of New York proper?
First, New York. And I actually I'm doing a lot of the States. And
amazing. Proper
book tour. And it is the first time because, I guess the guest list came out. It was COVID, and then Paris apartment babies, just general babies.
And now it's your rock and roll phase, as we've established.
My rock and roll phase.
It's time to go to America and have some fun. And how many children do you have, Lucy?
Two.
Two children. So they'll be, your husband will do the honours there when you're heading off.
Yeah, he thinks I'm on holiday. I keep trying to tell him it's not a holiday.
You know what? There are a lot of listeners here listening to the programme today going, when the partner, the mum or the dad, goes away for work, they go, oh, off you go. And you go, no, wait a minute. It's not like cocktails every night.
There's a little bit.
We are
doing a little bit of wine tasting in the middle at one point.
You're just giving him. You're just giving him.
He saw that email and I had to.
I was trying to give you.
I know.
You know, I gave you a life raft and you tore a hole in it. You know.
I know.
But you'll do that. But he's your first reader, isn't he? He's the guy with the red pen.
He is, and like you, he's a man. I don't seem to know many who reads a lot of fiction and a lot of fiction by women.
Yep.
He went on a real Curtis Sittenfeld binge recently.
Oh, right, okay, yeah.
Totally fell in love with her books.
Well, he's one of a few. There's a report today in the paper saying that men read men and women read men and women. But so your husband, Lisa's husband John, and me, we can form a troika of lads who read
book
gals.
Club.
Is that the book club? Actually, that was funny when I went to the launch of your book. It was only women.
It was.
Sorry, the soft launch with all the
I think
journalists.
you were the only beer, which is, see, I love beer, but I was drinking champagne that night.
You were, and there was all bubbles and wine, and then one man, I'll have a beer, please. You know, came in and go, I've got to establish myself here. Actually, it's only because I actually prefer beer to bubbles.
It's fair enough.
Is that fair enough?
We understand.
I had a lovely time, and they did this really clever thing, which was the place names. They bounced them around, so you weren't stuck with me for too long.
Yeah.
They said, quick, get her out. They're going into the sleeve. Get Lucy away from Tubridy. Save her.
I think I just ended up drinking everyone's wine, kind of going around minesweeping because I kept moving.
Don't ever change. Don't ever change. It's a beautiful thing. Lucy Foley, congratulations on your latest book. You just keep banging them out and they're just terrific. And I'm delighted for you. You're a delightful person to meet. You've signed my book for me. I'll put that up on Instagram a little later on. Good luck with your tour. It is work, despite what he says. I will have your back in this regard, even though you refuse it. But yeah, good luck with it all. It's so nice to see you, and thanks for being with us today.
Thanks so much for having me and for all your support.
You're so welcome.
Virgin Radio.